You're listening to the Southampton Delivery Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans.
If you want to have guarantees, you have to buy a wash machine.
Fonte with a scooping header.
We don't lose a match, either we win or we learn. And today we learned.
It's infield to Mane, 25 yards out. Lovely ball for Bella. Onside, 1-0. Blue mouse shot. Oh my word!
Unbelievable. We ran around the pitch like Bambi on ice. It would be very, very embarrassing to watch.
And now, your host, Matt Markstone. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Southampton Delivery Podcast, a podcast and newsletter dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans, and available right here on SouthamptonDelivery.com. My name is Matt Markstone. I am the host of the show, and no matter where you are, no matter how you may be listening, whether this is your first time or you've been here before, thanks for making the show part of your day. I hope that you enjoy it. And this week, to finish up the international break, I had the opportunity to speak with the Athletic UK's Carl Anka, who is the newest member of the media dedicated to covering Saints. And as many fans will know, for a long time, we have had a very small number of people covering Saints that are dedicated to covering Saints. Sure, the Telegraph gets involved every once in a while and things like that. But for the most part, it's the Southern Daily Echo and the BBC Radio Solent, and then a number of other fan-driven channels, from the Ugly Inside to, a number of podcasts and other writing outlets. And that's been what covers Saints for the majority. And so Carl is the newest member of the media team. He's a professional. He goes in, he's in the press conferences and doing all of these other things. And so for him to be there, I wanted to talk to him about that, about developing stories, about what the Athletic is doing differently than some of the other outlets out there. And I got to talk to Carl about all of that because there was no match to talk about in particular due to the international break. So the timing, I think, could not have been better. And as a result of that, I got to talk to Carl about a wide range of topics. So everything from growing up and playing sport to, writing and working, and, how he goes about stories and what it was like to come into Southampton and be kind of the new man on the scene and things like that. So get to talk to Carl about all of that, including, his role on the Totally Football Show, where you may have heard him before. He's also appeared on the Saints FC podcast and on the Parts Unknown podcast, which is wrestling. So we cover it all, from wrestling and video games to writing and Saints. And I hope that you enjoy it. I hope it passes the time. And I hope that you get to know Carl a little bit. And if you want to follow him on Twitter, which I highly recommend, he's at Anchorman616. That's ANKAMAN 616. And now, let's get to the conversation. Hope you enjoy it. And once again, thanks for listening. We'd like to welcome to the Southampton Delivery Podcast, Carl Anka. You can find him on Twitter at Ankaman616. Carl is the Saints correspondent for The Athletic. He's been around on some of the other podcasts, and you probably heard him on the Totally Football Show. But Carl, thanks for taking some time during the international break to jump on here and chat with me a little bit, and welcome to the show.
Hello, welcome. Yeah, I'm enjoying this. It's good to get on another podcast.
Yeah, I mean, you've been busy. You've been on the Totally Football Show with James Richardson a couple of times recently, and most recently talking about how Joey Barton really, I think, ruined Man United by getting sent off. Is that correct?
Yes. We play a fun game on the Totally Football Show called Flip Reverse, where we sort of pick a moment in football and do the sliding doors of what happened if such a thing didn't happen. So this Thursday we did if Joey Barton hadn't got sent off in the Aguero game. And I think 2 or 3 months ago, I did what if Didier Drogba didn't score in the 2012 Champions League final and Bayern Munich won, which is my favourite sort of butterfly effect of modern football. I think if Chelsea don't win that Champions League, there are at least four teams in Europe with different managers, and Eden Hazard would probably ended up at Spurs rather than Chelsea. So those are the sorts of things I like to do in my spare time.
Yeah. Nothing different or weird there. No big deal.
No, absolutely not.
I mean, I have a question about that. I mean, how did you get wrapped up in doing the Totally Football Show? I think James Richardson is probably somebody that a lot of the fans or the people that listen here will remember and know. And me personally, producer Ben, I've read his book, listened to his podcast. That he's the guy I kind of went to before I started doing this show. So there's a lot of connection there. And I was, I cried tears when they left and started their own company. But now I'm happy that they, get to hear more of them doing more things. So I mean, how did you wind up, working with those guys?
It was through producer Ben. So you may hear producer Ben Green. He's the man behind the mics for the Totally Football Show. He's a big wrestling fan. He really likes his WWE wrestling. Mm-hmm. And I think anyone, if you spend a little bit of time looking at my tweets, you can see I'm either referencing wrestling or talking about it a little bit. So he contacted me at the start of 2018, asking me if I'd be interested in doing a wrestling podcast, to which we did. It's called Parts Unknown. It's myself, Dr. Carrie Dunn, Matt Davis-Adams, who's the commentator for Chelsea TV, and Anton Talouis, who is a Sky Sports News presenter. And we watched every single WrestleMania in reverse chronological order. So episode 1 was WrestleMania 34, and I finished with us reviewing WrestleMania 1. So we finished that, and then partway through those recordings, producer Ben went, "You're a Manchester United fan, aren't you?" "Yes, I am." He goes, "Would you be interested in doing an episode of Totally as a test?" And we started from there. So I did a couple over the World Cup, and I started doing a few last season. And now, if I'm in London or whatnot, I'll just send a message and we'll see if you can hear some of my dulcet tones talking about football with James Richardson. James Richardson, obviously, to football fans of a certain generation, will always be the man who got them in love with Serie A due to his work with Football Italia. And he's a remarkable broadcaster. I'm very glad I get to share some space with him once in a while.
I mean, have you picked anything up from him in terms of like when you listen to him just talk about things or sum things up? And I know that as somebody who got into this, not doing podcasts before the show, like really, I took a lot of time listening to people do interviews and stuff like that. But just to listen to the way that he kind of brings things in and transitions from one to the other, I don't know. He's so good at his job, and I mean, people try to mimic him. I think I do a little bit too, and maybe we shouldn't, because he should just let him be his thing. But I mean, I think he's amazing. So I don't know. Have you learned anything just being around those guys, or in terms of, you did the wrestling podcast, but coming into it, do you try to pick up stuff from those guys since they've been doing it for so long, or you just kind of go in and be yourself?
I always try and pick up the power of anecdotes, the ability to admit when you have no idea what you're talking about. If you have no idea what you're talking about, can you make that sound funny? So, I think one problem we've got a lot in sports media, and I think in general media, is it's quite hard to admit you don't know the answer. And I think the ability to say that as a broadcaster, to go, I have no idea what you're talking about, or I have no idea about this gentleman or whatnot. If you can say that without sounding like a complete tool, or if you find a way to turn that into asking a more knowledgeable person about that, those are two very big things. Because famously, James Richardson wasn't meant to be the presenter of Football Italia all those years ago. It was meant to be Paul Gascoigne. And they put the camera on Gazza, and Gazza's quite nervous when he's in front of the camera, as you might see from some of his interviews. And James Richardson was the producer at the time, living in Italy with his then partner, and sort of from behind the camera trying to coach Gazza into presenting. So I went, why don't you stand in front of the camera? So his football knowledge was not the greatest back in the 90s. He's obviously got a lot better now because he's surrounded himself with very, very talented people. He knows how to ask the right questions. He also knows when a question is not too obvious. So I spend a lot of my time on spreadsheets and looking at XG and whatnot. So I think everyone knows the difference between a 4-4-2 and a 4-3-3, which might not necessarily be the case. So every now and again, it's worth it for someone to go, "Carl, please explain that."
Yeah.
So those are little things I try and do a lot more. Asking the right questions, surrounding myself with people who are more talented than myself, and being okay with admitting I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Well, on that note, surrounding myself with people who are more talented than me, that's kind of why you're here. That's why a lot of the guests come on, because I am, I mean, some of the people that listen to the show will know that I've only been watching the team for kind of since they came back to the Premier League. So I haven't been around. I've been around a little while, but not that long. And my my football knowledge is also kind of wrapped up in that time. I was a big baseball fan before and still am. But my son basically said to me when he was younger, like, I don't want to play baseball anymore. I want to play soccer is what we call it here. And from then on, it's been, all right, let's learn everything we can about it. And I'm pretty obsessive about stuff. And a couple years later, here we are.
Amazing.
Yeah. And I mean, so his experience, my son's experience growing up was me basically doing the exact same thing to him that my dad did to me in terms of coaching, which was work and push them really, really hard from a very young age to the point where he quit. I didn't quit. So I have, he hasn't had the healthiest relationship with certain sports, and I've backed off a lot. Turns out his mother is much better at coaching him and doing stuff now. So he's enjoying volleyball and other things. So we'll let that go. But, I mean, for you growing up, did sport play a role in your house? I think you grew up in London.
I grew up in London. Yes, I was born in Leytonstone, David Beckham's hometown. And then I moved out to Ilford, which is borderline East London and Essex, so sort of where the original Cockneys moved to after the Second World War. And I played football every recess or playtime up until about the age of 14. So I was a pretty good member of the school football team up until secondary school, and then better players came along, and I discovered Game Boys and Yu-Gi-Oh cards and whatnot, and I stopped playing sport for a long time. I played a lot of tennis growing up as a kid. I played doubles. My mom, basically, quite a few school teachers said I was very competitive and I needed to find a way to get along with others. So my mom made me play doubles tennis to learn humility, because you can't scream at your doubles partner because then they get worse. So I had to find a way to be encouraging to someone I didn't particularly like for the greater good. Just if you want a little glimpse as to how competitive I've always been. So I played a lot of tennis growing up as well. And when I turned 18, I went to university. I started playing rugby. So I played rugby from 18 up until this summer. So I played at least twice a week. Well, trained twice a week, played one game through university and for an amateur team in London when I came back from university. And now I've moved from London and I'm living in Southampton. I now play five-a-side soccer every single week. I play 2 or 3 games. So yeah, I've always been a fairly active person. Someone once asked me, am I a nerdy jock or am I a jockey nerd? And I think I'm a jockey nerd. I was definitely a nerd before I was a jock.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's a fair kind of a assessment. And I think you mentioned somebody reached out to you and got you to play five-a-side. They invited you along. Is that correct?
Yes. Basically, I moved to Southampton, and I don't really know anyone in the city at the moment. So when I first moved, I was sort of every now and again tweeting, does someone want to be my friend? And I said, I've got brand new AstroTurfs, and I'd like to play five-a-side with someone. And a gentleman called Connor DM'd me and said, I've got a team that we've just started if you want to play. So the team is called Lee Catmull FC. We play with our shirts tucked in because in honor of Lee Catmull.
There you go.
And we lost our first 3 games, but we've won 2 in a row now. So we're getting there.
Connor's a really nice guy. He's been on the show a bunch of times. He's written for the newsletter and things like that. He's great, and he works himself to death trying to do all kinds of stuff. So I'm glad you got hooked up with the right guy, I think. So glad you're enjoying it. But you mentioned kind of going into university, and you didn't study journalism.
No, I studied creative writing.
Okay.
I wanted to be a screenwriter. I wanted to make movies.
Okay.
And I won a competition in first year for a script I wrote that was meant to be a bit like Superbad, sex comedy, teen nonsense. And I finished that, and then my lecturer said, "Hey, that was really fun. Are your main characters meant to be, awful people?" And I said, "No." And then she very politely recommended I took some other modules and broadened my horizons. So by the time I finished, I've graduated in cultural studies with a minor in creative writing. So writing was always there. I always wanted to tell stories of some sort of kind. And then after graduation, I did some internships for FHM, a place called Sabotage Times, Science, Sci-Fi Magazine, Total Film. I worked for a children's charity for a year and a bit. I worked at BuzzFeed for 9 months. I worked at the Independent newspaper for a little bit. I've been around, mostly in a freelance capacity. So prior to this job at The Athletic, I was one of the senior editors at the Players Tribune, if you've heard of that organization as well. So yeah, I've been around. The way it used to go was from January until March, I'd be covering film as a freelance journalist, and then March there tends to be like a little release of video games. So I'll do March, April covering some video games. Then you go into summer, where all the summer blockbusters. So then I'd read a lot of comic books. So I'd be in, this is what Captain America 5 looks like. That sort of freelance work. Then you'd have, you'd go into the, September, October. October in the United Kingdom is Black History Month, so I'd be writing a little bit about that. And then you'd go into November. November is when typically Call of Duty is released, or when FIFA is released. So I'd be writing a lot about video games at that point in time. Then you get into December, then I'll be writing about movies again. So that was sort of how I wrote and worked year on for about 2 or 3 years. And then obviously in 2018, I was doing that. And then the World Cup happened. And then I started writing about the World Cup, and everyone went, "Oh, you're a football journalist. Go be a football journalist." I went, "Wait, no, fine, I'll be a football journalist." Yeah. So here I am.
Yeah, journalism. If you look back a couple of years, didn't look all that great as a career opportunity. It seemed like newspapers and things like that were collapsing and folding and all this other kind of stuff. And you look at just the landscape, especially in America. I can't speak for the UK necessarily through all this time, but I think we were actively pushing kids away from stuff like that because I'm a high school teacher, and as a high school teacher, we want the kids to be, successful. And a lot of our kids, where I live, their parents work, 2 jobs, or they work super long hours. A lot of our students' parents are field workers. And so, they're trying to go to college or do something, and we're trying to push them towards a career that, basically goes 9 to 5. And I feel so guilty about that now, because I think we've turned entire generations of kids, or entire, classes worth of students into people who will go out and work for money and not for any kind of joy. And it sounds like you were able to, mesh a couple of your interests and things that you love, and in terms of writing, and then also in terms of video games and pop culture and comic books and all this stuff, and turn it into kind of a career. And I guess I just have a question about, when you were doing that, was there an active kind of thing in your head that you were going like, I want to write about this because I enjoy it? Or was it, I can get by with writing about stuff I enjoy and then also make enough money to survive? Or like, what was there a thought process there? Or was it just kind of you fell into it? Or how did that come about?
That's for one say I was in no way doing well financially during the early parts of that career. There was a lot of writing for not much money, and a lot of an inability to go to the movies or go out on holiday and whatnot at the start, especially. I think I'm doing a little bit better now. I'm okay for the first time in a while. I'm like, all right, I can afford to do silly things.
Yeah.
I think for one thing I always recommend, I do get, and I've said this to anyone who can find me, my DMs on Twitter are open, and if anyone has any want for advice on how to get through, while the route I took was very unorthodox, and I very much doubt such a route exists anymore, because the internet in 2012 and 2013 is very different from the internet in 2019. The thing I always said was, be really, really curious, read as much as you can, and then basically figure out what stories do you think you could offer interesting insight into, or what stories do you think need to be told. So my first big entry into a lot of things was the fact that I've been reading Marvel comic books since I was about 7 years of age, and the dominant form of blockbuster right now is the MCU. So every so often a trailer will break, or someone will be cast, or there'll be mention of something going on in the MCU, and if you pay enough attention, there's a boss going, someone please explain to me who Moon Knight is, or someone please explain to me what the Infinity Stones are. And at the time, I was one of the only people in the room that could, the Infinity Stones do this is how they work, or the fact that Tony Stark is wearing this sort of armor means that this will probably happen in Iron Man 2. So that was my first start, just basically being the one to fill in the niche knowledge of a subject. And my thing was always, a technique I learned was, you take a piece of paper, you write down 10 facts about yourself. So where you were born, what your job was when you were at university, what your favorite pizza topping is, things like that. And then on each fact about yourself, try and think of 3 headlines that you can turn into articles. So I read those in Marvel comic books. what 3 topics can I get from Marvel topics? Or I'm a Manchester United fan. What 3 things about Manchester United do I think I can write up? And that was my sort of constant go-to of, if you can get that sort of idea system going through your head. Like, my favorite film is The Princess Bride. What can I say about The Princess Bride that do you think other people will be interested in hearing about? And I think that's a really good way of getting under the nose of editors and being very much, hello, I have an idea. The idea is this. This idea I think is interesting to tell right now because of this. And then finally you go, I think I'm the perfect person to answer this question or to tell this story because of the following credentials. And if you do that regularly enough, then you tend to get your foot in the door this way or that way. And then from there, it's a case of getting lucky enough, having enough consistency. Hopefully the first type person you've impressed will tell another person that you're impressive. And then you can slowly work your way up. It's hard work. I drink about 4 or 5 cups of coffee a day. And I spend a remarkable amount of time looking at spreadsheets, which is a thing I never thought I'd end up doing. It's one of those things. I can't believe I did a liberal arts degree only to end up relying on spreadsheets all my life. But here you go.
Yeah. There you are.
Yeah. It's truly one of the things that every person from like high school up should be taught, that being good at Excel and spreadsheets is the best cross discipline you could ever hope to master in the workplace.
I spent a lot of time on spreadsheets at school, looking at student scores and trying to norm things for the whole department. And most people in my department are not good at it. And so I get a lot of bags of coffee, different types of artisan coffee given to me for running all those. And so I'm into that. So I'm like, you guys can pay me in coffee. I have no problem doing this because it takes 4.5 seconds to do what you guys need. So I will gladly take the coffee that you guys will pay me in. And I was going to ask you, you prefer coffee or tea, but it sounds like you go coffee. How do you take your coffee?
I take my coffee black in the morning. So the very first coffee I pick is black. And then when I go out to the coffee shop, I try and get a nice little vanilla latte. So that's my treat to myself. But yeah, I know things are going bad on a working day when I have 4 cups of coffee before 12 o'clock. Yeah. That's my big, like, oh, I've got a deadline.
Yeah. Absolutely. You find any good coffee shops in Southampton? Any local places you like?
There's one place called Coffee Lab, and I very much like the vibe of it. It's will charge you a large amount of money for a very small cup of coffee, which is, being a pretentious metropolitan liberal elite member of London. That's exactly the coffee I want.
So just like being in London, man. Sounds about right. But yeah, well, it sounds like you're really enjoying yourself, and I've only been to Southampton once. I was there for the England women's national game against Wales way back before a couple years ago for qualifying. But it sounds like you're enjoying yourself, and you kind of embedded yourself in it sounds like it's all going well. But so you made the jump to the Athletic, and initially you weren't covering Southampton, you were covering Manchester United. Is that correct?
Yes, I was. So I was freelancing when I was at the Players Tribune. I was freelancing for the Athletic when they were doing their athletic soccer project. So that vertical had the top 6 teams in England, Real Madrid, Barcelona, and I want to say a little bit about Bayern Munich. And that was very much their test for what we now have and what we now call the Athletic UK. Mm. So I got an email from a gentleman in the American company who said, would you be interested about writing about Manchester United this season? To which I said, I live in London. Is that a problem? And in the true sort of sign of what the Athletic try and do, they went, no, we go, that should be fine. We find you to be a very funny writer on Twitter and on other places, and we're hoping to see if you can bring that sort of writing style over to the Athletic. I thought I did a decent job. Obviously, it's gone a lot better than I thought it did because now I'm working full time there. So we've had a lot of fun. Obviously the Athletics thing is, they don't want to do match reports, and they want to make sure everything written is informed and is entertaining, and there's some sort of valuable insight or something interesting there to be gained. So those are things I always try and carry through every single article I do now. I am covering Southampton, which is it's a fun, unique challenge. It's one of the very few places where I've never been told my ideas are bad. I've simply been told I have to prove it. Okay. Which is always a good thing. Every now and again I've gone, I think Southampton or Manchester United do this, and the boss goes, can you prove it? to which I often get, compared to other companies where you might have an hour to prove it, I often have 1 or 2, 3 days to prove it, which makes it a lot easier to prove.
Yeah, which puts you onto page 6 or 7 of the spreadsheet. So
yes,
gives you plenty of time. I mean, in terms of going from a freelance role where you're maybe working on, I mean, I'm sure you're working on a bunch of stuff now, but in terms of a freelance role, you may be working for different, writing for different companies at the same time, dedicating your time to The Athletic and kind of embedding yourself in Southampton. I guess, has that made your life easier in terms of writing, or do you put more pressure on yourself? And are you kind of like one of those people who's super like self-driven and self-motivated and you put that pressure on yourself, or do you, outside deadlines and your editor kind of breathing down your neck saying, hey, I haven't seen a draft of this yet? Is that what kind of pushes you along?
That's a really interesting question. So I still freelance in a non-sporting capacity. So I've been the NME with a music review recently. I did a little bit for the BBC in regards to film. So I still do work otherwise. I don't think of myself as a really driven, like hyper motivated person. But then obviously when I describe myself as on page 4 of a spreadsheet and drinking 4 cups of coffee, and still freelancing despite the fact that I've got a full-time job, I clearly must be doing something. So I might just be absolutely clueless as to how an average person works. It's an interesting thing. I am meant to be writing my novel. I have an idea for a novel, and I've been trying to write that since about 2017. I'm about halfway through that now, but I probably, I should be further along there. I'll get around to that eventually.
Yeah,
I'm busy, but in a it's a fun busy.
Yeah,
the way that describes it is busy is good. Busy means you're needed. I like to keep busy wherever possible.
Yeah. I'm there. I have this thing where I can't sit still. It doesn't go well. In terms of my family goes like, hey, you're off for the summer. What are we going to do? It's like, well, I have this long list of things that I would like to get done. And then my wife just like shakes her head and says, well, I'll see you in September when school starts, I guess. That's okay. And, as I'm getting out of bed this morning at quite early, I won't say what time, but I was getting out of bed. She's like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm going to record a podcast. She was like, I don't understand you. But she did point out to me on Twitter the other day. She's like, when you go, like when you finally kind of pass away, I'll be able to listen to your voice forever on the podcast. And I was like, can you not say stuff like that? Like, I'm 34. Can we not go there yet? But anyway, and that's actually something I was going to ask you. You mentioned on the Totally Football show yesterday, I mean, obviously there's been a fairly big controversy broke this week in terms of football wives and leaked stories and I won't say journalism for the company that was writing the stories, but you mentioned, when things like that happen, you got to get out there and get in front of it and just kind of, soak it all in on Twitter. So, I've been accused on here before, right, by a couple of people of making jokes that don't work. Would you rather make a joke that doesn't work and take a chance, or just not make the joke for fear of like coming off, sounding a bit dumb for lack of a better word?
Oh no, I make the joke regardless. Of course. I've bought a really big coat recently. Here's an example of making a joke regardless and it coming back to that. I bought a really big coat recently because it's getting colder. I'm going to spend a lot of time inside in football stadiums this season, so I need a big coat. So I was talking to someone and they were asking me about how I've moved to Southampton, and they said, oh, are you dating right now? I went, oh no, I'm not dating at the moment. Blah, 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 blah. And I said, do you use any of the dating apps? And I said, oh no, I don't like using any of the apps right now. I don't really use that as a way to talk to people. To which they said, oh, but how do you go out and talk to people? And I said, oh, that's why I bought this coat. And I just watched their face turn from like mild interest to just, who is this idiot talking to me?
Is the coat you're talking about? Not, is this the black coat with the big collar?
That's the one with the big collar. So I made the joke and watched this person just sort of go, oh, what an idiot. And I said, I turned around and told my friend, the joke was worth it.
Yeah, absolutely.
My big problem is if I have a chance to be nice to loads of people or to be funny just to myself, I tend to be funny just to myself, which is how I end up in a lot of trouble. But you got to make yourself laugh. If you don't, well, what's the point?
Yeah. The students who sit in the front row hear a lot more than the students who sit in the back row in my class, because I say a lot of stuff under my breath. And just watch the kids in the front row just go like you just see them like kind of look at each other and they'll look at me, and I'll just deny it. And that's my favorite part. Although a couple of the kids did find me on Instagram and started messaging me, and I'm like, look, I'm not messaging you guys back on Instagram. It's a good way for me to get in trouble. But one of them did send me a message that said, you have 1,000 followers and only 12 likes. She goes, you're doing it wrong. I'm like, well, fair enough. Girl who does makeup tutorials from my classroom. That's all right. I have a couple more questions about just, writing for Southampton and of course we'll talk about the team too, but I think this is a good opportunity to be able to talk about some of the stuff, because I don't think people know a lot of the stuff, just kind of about you and about writing and it's an international break. And, unfortunately, Rooney's wife and Vardy's wife do not play for us, so we don't have that to talk about. But I mean, when you moved to Southampton and you chose to take that job, I mean, Southampton is a relatively small community. Not that it doesn't have a fairly big catchment area or the population's not that large, but it's not London. It's not Manchester. It's not one of these kind of huge metropolitan areas. And I wouldn't say that it's the most diverse of areas either. And you coming in and if you look at some of the press conferences, most weeks, there is one microphone up there on the stand in front of Rob Hasenhüttl, unless a big team is coming to town, and then there's 5 or 6 or whatever it is. But for you to come into such a small community and start writing for somebody like The Athletic and start asking questions like, how were you, what was the welcome like? What was how were you accepted by kind of the people that were already here and doing that work when you came in and started to kind of, try to do your job?
Oh, brilliant. It was really nice and edifying, because one of the things I was really worried about was other journalists not taking it well. So I moved to Southampton 3 weeks before The Athletic launched. And obviously due to all manner of interesting contract stipulations, I couldn't really reveal who I was or why I was in the city. So I sort of pretended I was something else for a little bit while I was making contacts. But then obviously, so The Athletic UK launched on August 8th. And everyone on the beat has been really, really nice to me. So the local newspaper, the Southern Daily Echo, their journalists have been really nice to me. The radio commentator from BBC Radio Solent has been really nice and friendly. It's a small pack, but they all look after each other very, very well. And there's been no talk of a rivalry or of anyone trying to do anyone else over, which is really nice. They're nice to me in a way that they didn't have to be. But it's nice when people are nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
That's been really nice. Obviously, spending a lot of time in press conferences, you are correct that it is a very small pack unless one of the top 6 members do come to town. And then when the top 6 members do come to town, it takes on a completely different quality.
Can you feel the change when it happens? Can you kind of see them? Can you tell the top 6 reporters from the guys who are in the grind on kind of the circuit, kind of alone, more or less?
Oh yeah, I mean it's the simple difference of having 4 people in the press conference room to having 12, or having and that sort of very basic thing, and that's the pre-match press conference, and then you've got the post-match and differences in size and how things change, which is just the way it is. There are 6 teams in England who are regarded as Champions League / title contenders every single year. Those are the teams that get televised the most on UK television. Those are teams that get a disproportional amount of coverage in the national newspapers and whatnot. And those are teams that get the majority of the talking time on podcasts, on highlights packages and whatnot. So something I found really, really interesting since covering Southampton is, obviously I'm watching Match of the Day for Southampton now rather than watching it for Manchester United. And my big thing is they only talk about Southampton for about 30 seconds on average most weekends. Southampton tends to be one of the games that is played on a Saturday or Sunday. And then also for the Chelsea game, they spoke at length about Chelsea, about Tammy Abraham, about Mason Mount, about the youth movement, about how they're trying to play this expansive style in the Frank Lampard. The presenter went, Southampton have a really bad home record. Should fans be concerned? And that was the question. And then it moved on to another team. And I was very much, wait a minute. No, there's loads in that question that you haven't quite answered. So that's been quite interesting. After years of being a 1%er in terms of football, it's a bit different to go, oh, this is how other people receive football news. So hopefully it means there's a gap in the I won't say in the market, but there's definitely a space that The Athletic and other companies can fill by going, here is the 10-minute discussion on your football team.
Yeah, and I think, I did not subscribe to The Athletic until you started writing. And part of the reason I think is I'm part of the generation that, we didn't have to pay for stuff. Things have been free for a really long time for most of my life. And the idea that you would pay for something that you are already getting for free was kind of foreign to me. And then I kind of, had some life changes and realized, like, look, there are certain things that I really, really enjoy. And if I can make sure that those things continue and I can get a little bit extra in return, I will do that. And people have shocked me by doing that as well with the show. It's some of the patrons are amazing. And it feels good to know that people value kind of what you do. So, but I wanted to just kind of mention, going back real quick to what you said about being accepted and people being nice and things like that. Like I feel that too, because this show, I mean, I do the show from California. There were, The Ugly Inside was there, a couple of other podcasts, the Saints FC podcast, the Total Saints podcast, they all kind of started around the same time. And everybody, there's no rivalry. Everybody's been super supportive. We talk, not all the time, but quite frequently. And the guys are great. And there have been other podcasts that have come along since then, and everybody is, try to be supportive, try to encourage people, try to let people do what makes them happy. And if they ask for help or if they have a question, answer it, because I got a lot of, like I said before, Ben Green was there to answer my questions for no reason. He had no business responding to me ever. But he did. So it's, it makes a big difference. And I figure if you can make a difference on somebody's life, or somebody can make a difference for you, you just try to turn around and pass that on. So, yeah, but, I wanted to ask a little bit about The Athletic in terms of you. I mean, obviously they've given you the opportunity to do this. You took the opportunity to do this. You kind of probably, I guess, had to give up some stuff to move to Southampton. It's not your same coverage of Manchester United, which is a team you like, and it's not living in London. But I mean, in terms of the support that they've given you and the freedom they've given you to write articles, I mean, how does that come about? If you have an idea of what kind of process do you go through to make sure, or to get it from an idea to being published on the site?
That's a really good question. So The Athletic right now we've got a staff of around about just over 50 in the United Kingdom. We've got a mothership in London, and we've got one dedicated journalist for every Premier League club, a few in the Championship, one in Celtic, one on Rangers, and a little bit of coverage in Europe. And we've got on top of that some statistical people, some editors, an investigative journalism team, and some other senior editors there. So what tends to happen is it will be a weekday or Monday, Tuesday morning, and I will make a phone call to the mothership and say, hello, this is something I want to write about this week. This is someone I'm trying to find. And this is something I've noticed from watching Southampton football games that I think is worth noting. And then based on those three things, I'll get a yes, no, maybe on what my idea is. I'll probably get some steering on if I'm trying to find someone. So I'll probably be told, where that person is living, or if that person speaks English or not. Or if I need to possibly get a translator or whatnot. And then from the thing I've noticed from Southampton games, I get told whether or not if that's worthy of writing now, or if I should wait a little bit, or if I should try and prove that by either a former manager or stats. So that's my general day to day. And I've had maybe, for the most part, I've not been told no. I've just been told, can you prove it? And it's can you prove it by either talking to a coach or someone in football who has first-hand knowledge of that, or can you prove that via stats? So at the moment, you may have noticed from quite a few of my reads that there tends to be a couple of shot maps or looks at tactical shape or notings of substitute timings, or there is very often the caption, all stats are taken from transfermarket.com. Because I try and use numbers and science to prove stuff. Obviously, football is a very simple game, and numbers and stats try and complicate stuff. So I'll be trying to not get bogged down in XG too much this season, and I will try and use player interviews and conversations with people involved in Southampton as much as possible as well. So yeah, that's generally my day to day. So this week, one thing we also always do is we don't do match reports. What we tend to do is debriefs or findings of big things that happened in games. So if I'm watching a game on Saturday, I will not be watching it with the remit of saying, on this minute this thing happened, and this minute this thing happened, but I'll be looking to note things such as what the fans are chanting, or I'll be looking to note the times that Hassel will make substitutes, or the people he constantly brings on in his substitute signings, or whether or not James Ward-Prowse is taking his free kicks with the instep technique, or if he's moving to a more Ronaldo technique. So the idea is we try and focus on the minutiae and then try and write that on a grand scale, which we think hopefully gives the Athletic a selling point that's worthy of your subscription.
Yeah. I mean, doing that, I mean, has that changed the way that you watch football? And for going from, and when you sit down and watch a Manchester United match, just, for leisure, do you do that differently than when you were watching Saints to try to pick this stuff out, or now do you have to watch every match in the same manner?
It's a really good question. The way I've described it recently is this job has ruined my ability to watch a bad game of football. So I now watch one game a week in the football stadium, and then because I like football, I'll probably watch one more game on television. So if it's Champions League week, I'll probably watch the Champions League game, or if there is a game on a Sunday, because Southampton tend to play at 3:00 on a Saturday. If there's a game on Sunday, I'll probably watch one of the Sunday games. And I like watching Manchester City, I like watching Liverpool, I like watching Tottenham, I like watching Arsenal, I like watching Chelsea. But if the extra game that week is, say, someone like Watford versus Brighton, I'm not going to watch that, because my brain is going to start trying to figure out why this game of football is not being played well. And I don't want to do that on my day off.
That's fair. That's fair enough.
No disrespect to Watford and Brighton, who play very good football in patches, but at some point, I am watching football for fun, and it's a lot harder to watch football for fun when it is not of European quality, shall we say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes just watching Manchester City or even watching Liverpool, which is tough to say, and I'm sure it's tough to say as a United fan as well, but as a Southampton fan, it's tough to say this, but sometimes watching them just makes you smile. You watch the things they do and the way the game is played, and you just go like, man, that just looks like fun, and same thing, International Week. There are occasionally I will want to watch some Eastern European teams, especially if you get down in the former Yugoslavia area. Some of those teams come up against each other. You're like, this is going to be a nasty game. I kind of want to watch this. But aside from that, I don't want to watch, I don't want to watch Turkey play all that often. I don't want to watch Ukraine play all that often. I'd rather watch the Netherlands play. I'd rather watch, some of these other countries that are good. I mean, even watching the U.S. yesterday play against Cuba. Now we're speaking on Saturday, so Friday, the U.S. just dismantled Cuba, but Cuba was really bad. And by the end of it, it was like, man, this is just kind of sad. Like, I'm not sure this is the greatest game of football I've ever seen, but the U.S. is scoring goals, and hopefully, they qualify for something soon. That would just be great. But I have one more question kind of about writing, and then we'll talk a little bit about Saints. We have some questions from listeners and stuff that we'll get to. But you wrote, recently there's been concerning Manchester City. There was a Bernardo Silva tweet that drew some controversy. You wrote an article kind of because you kind of mentioned that they trot out John Barnes whenever there's kind of a race issue, and he kind of comes on and says what he says, and you wrote a response. And I've read a lot of your stuff on The Athletic. I won't pretend that I catch every single article, because sometimes things get in the way. But you wrote, and you got, I don't want to say you got a lot of hate, but there was a very active article. The comment section was alive and going on that. And for you, I mean, I guess one of the things that I wanted to ask about is support in that realm. When you decide to weigh in, whenever anybody weighs in on race or anything like that, it seems to be one of those polarizing kind of subjects, more so than XG even, which is surprising sometimes when you read around the internet. But like, I mean, when you decided to take that stand, I mean, do you feel at all like you're starting to touch on things that make people uncomfortable, and does that matter? Or do you what was your thought process going through that?
I knew that article was me putting my head above the parapet. I was informed by my editors before that article was written that it would get a reaction. Obviously, being a black man on the internet, I'm used to getting a certain reaction when I talk about some subjects. So I talk about them when I feel a need to, and I try not to talk about it too much because it can ruin your day if you talk about it all day, every day. Not because I don't like talking about it, or I'd much rather not talk about it, but because if you pay enough attention, it could be quite hard to not constantly have something to write about, especially when, based on certain world leaders and their behaviors at the moment, you can spend all day talking about race issues or other forms of bigotry. So that article I wrote basically explaining why the Bernardo Silva incident was a thing, why that was slightly different to another bit of football racism in Peter Beardsley, who's been suspended from Newcastle, and why I find John Barnes' current positioning quite frustrating. I didn't think it was too incendiary. I wrote it because I thought it needed to be said, because I felt certain things had gone on a bit too long without being addressed. My editors have been really, really nice to me before writing that piece. They were very, very nice to me after writing that piece. My boss very, very succinctly went, "You've done very, very good work. Take heed from the people that are telling you you're doing good work. Pay no attention to people that said you don't know what you're talking about. Take as much time as you need to recover from this, and don't you dare look at the comment section." Got it? So I didn't. You may see I tend to be in the comment section of most articles. If someone asks a nice question, I am not in the comment section for that piece because life is too short. And it's one of those things that I hope everyone gets to work with a good boss, because once you get one, it's really nice to finally recognize what a good boss is, how a good boss operates. And this is not me brown-nosing, but the athletic generally is looking after me right now, which is quite nice. So, and it's quite nice after years of freelancing and being my own boss to have a boss who's in front and in charge and being like, "No, you're doing good work. Look after yourself. Do this, and this." So yeah, things are going well there.
I mean, from John Barnes and tweets and all those things, the internet is sometimes a very nasty place, and there are a lot of things that we can deal with. But let's move on and talk about just the team a little bit. And I think most people will have to put it in the show notes that we start talking about the team. What is it? 45 minutes in. So sorry guys. But I hope everybody's enjoyed this. I've enjoyed this. And if nobody else, if hopefully somebody's learned something. So I think that's fine. So, I mean, just looking at Saints season now, it's up until this point, we're 8 games in, and I try not to look at the table until about 10 games in. But is coming into this summer and writing about the team for kind of the first time. I mean, is this where you would have expected Saints to be, sitting on 7 points? Given the schedule and everything else, is this about where you would have expected, or are we underachieving a little bit?
Southampton are probably on par for what they are as a club, but there was a large amount of optimism and hope that Southampton would be doing better, because it was this is Ralph Hasenhüttl's first preseason. It's his first time in charge of this squad. They had a very, very good half season under him. So that little spell between December, when Hasenhüttl came in, and April, where Southampton were mathematically safe, they accrued points at a clip not dissimilar from a Europa League side. So, and everyone, while they dropped off a bit in April, the idea was basically, well, if Hasenhüttl can get the team playing like that all season long, Southampton should finish top half of the table, if not high in the bottom half of the table. Whereas what's happened now, after a couple of disappointing performances in the last month or so, it's, okay, so Southampton aren't as bad as they were when they were under Pellegrino or Mark Hughes, but they're not much better. Touch wood, they're not going to be in a relegation battle, but they aren't going to be much far off it, which...
It's not great.
Yeah, yes.
To say the least.
Yeah.
But I mean, as you said, the optimism was definitely there. And I think that we're all, I mean, for the most part, for large parts of Hasenhüttl's tenure, the football has at least been more enjoyable. And I think a lot of the fans, when we were going back go back to Puel, He finished 8th. He didn't have a great season. Maybe the table position lies a little bit because of some of the ways that certain teams were playing that season, but the football was just not exciting. And you move on from there to Pellegrino and to Hughes, and it wasn't exciting. I was at Hughes' first game. The first game I ever attended live in the Premier League was Mark Hughes' first game, where we lost 3-0 at West Ham, and it was an absolute mess. And it didn't get much better from there. He managed to keep us up, and I think I'm always optimistic whenever somebody else comes in.
This gets me so mad.
What's that?
I guess he didn't keep you up. Remember, Mark Hughes did not keep Southampton up. Swansea kept Southampton up from being rubbish.
Okay. Yeah. He was in charge when we stayed up. How's that?
There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
And that, it's frustrating to watch because I tend to try to be positive about it and believe that the manager can do it. And then when Hasenhüttl comes in, you start looking at his track record and looking at just the different style of football that he plays. And you've talked at length and written at length about the 4-2-2-2 and tactical changes and shifts and everything else. And at the end of the day, I could just say that I want to, if the team gets torn apart by Liverpool or Manchester City and somebody passes through the press and scores some wonderful goal because we were pressing and pushing and trying to score, like, I'm okay with that. The frustrating thing is to watch us sit back and pass the ball and have 65% possession, not break a team down and lose 1-0 like that. I don't want to see that necessarily. I'd rather see us take chances. But I mean, looking at the teams going forward, are the players there to play this type of high pressing system? Or I think my biggest concern right now is the fact that we've played the same 3 midfielders almost every match. And can they do this for, 2 cup competitions and a Premier League season without eventually just kind of running themselves into the ground and us being in some sort of danger of having to change formation or shoehorn guys in or play guys out of position, which we also don't seem that uncomfortable with.
Yeah, so the Hassel is going into the season. I called Hassel the best manager in the bottom half of the table. I said that depends on whether or not you class Southampton as a bottom half side. I think he's managed in the Champions League, and he took up the Red Bull Leipzig to second in the league during his time there. And I absolutely believe he is. One good thing about watching Southampton is even when Southampton have a bad game, I understand what is going on. There is a very clear tactical plan for Southampton that is not seen in many clubs, including those in the top 6. Southampton play with a clearer vision than Manchester United do. So that's depressing to say as a Manchester United fan. I absolutely believe Ralph Hassel is a better manager than Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Next, that sort of thing. And he's more experienced than Frank Lampard as well. So that's the sort of thing there. The squad is a lot weaker than I thought it was. So when I moved to Southampton, I had no internet for 3 weeks. So one thing I did was I read loads of books. I watched loads of old footage. And I played FIFA. I played FIFA 19 on the highest difficulty. I did career mode with Southampton to try and get a feel of that squad and whatnot. And I thought, okay, so there are parts of this squad where they're top half standard. I think that the front 4 is top half standard. I think the front 4 of Shea Adams, Danny Ings, Nathan Redmond, when Moussa Djenepo is fit as well, I think that as a front 4, that's top 10, absolutely. The central midfield, Romeo is fantastic at what he does. He doesn't do many things, but the 3 things he does well: tackle, get turnovers, and then give the ball to someone else who is more talented than him going forward. Great, fantastic. Again, one of those players who, again, I think he'd improve Manchester United right now. He's absolutely the sort of player that Paul Pogba would enjoy playing next to, because Romeo would just go, all right, Pogba, you do the nice Pogba things, and I'll do the nasty stuff that you don't want to do. So I think Romeo is good at that. I think the problem with Southampton's midfield is there's much of a muchness. I think Højbjerg, while he can be a good passer and he has got a decent passing range and does try and get forward, I think he's not quite the box-to-box attacking midfielder Southampton need. And I think James Ward-Prowse has spent the majority of this season playing wide, which I absolutely don't like. I don't think he's quick enough to play on right wing. I think he's got the lung capacity to play anywhere really, but I don't think he's quite quick enough to make that right wing position his own. And I think in the middle of the park, he has to be particularly ball dominant to make things happen, which unfortunately they prefer to press up high, rather than dominant possession. So the midfield is okay. I'm not going to say it's bad. I'm not going to say it's great. I'll say it's okay. And the defense is bad. It's a lot worse than I thought it was. You can squint and see a very good back four. So in my head, I want to see Angus Gunn in goal. I want to see Ryan Bertrand at left back. I want to see Jan Valley at right back. And I want to see Benerick and Danzo as the centre backs. I think that's the best back five unit that Southampton have. We've not seen it yet because we've seen loads of chops and changes. We've seen Yoshida come in for games against top six because Hassel wants to use more experience in there. We've seen Vestergaard play many games, which there's what I have to say about Vestergaard, and so forth. So there is a good squad in there. There is a good squad in there that if they get enough game time together and everyone's fit, I think Southampton can finish anywhere between 9th and 14th. It's just a case of getting those people on the pitch at the same time and getting them firing, which needs to happen. And unfortunately, it hasn't happened because, one, the fixture list has been absolutely brutal, and two, there's been some injuries.
Yeah. I guess looking at that, I mean, what's preventing Hassan Hudl from trying that back four aside from, I mean, Valerie's kind of been out of sight for this season, even though he did quite well last year. And my one thing that I would say about him was he looked much better playing in a back five than he did in a back four. But he's had another kind of half of a year to grow and train, and hopefully he'll develop, and he's going to make mistakes because he is young. But I mean, that would be an extremely young kind of back line. Do you think that's enough kind of leadership and international experience, I guess, to go with a back four like that, or a back five if you include Gunn, in the Premier League when we have been kind of so mistake prone?
Well, the idea of experience in defence is one of those things that, now I'm pulling a face as I'm saying this, you can just about make up with the experience in terms of physical age if you have a young unit that plays with each other all the time.
Okay.
So it's very, very clear. It's very clear that Hassel likes Benerick. Benerick started every single Premier League game for him, and he looks to be the centre back that understands Hassel's system more so than anyone else. I think Yoshida is a good centre back. He does every so often have a mistake in him, and sometimes he's not the fastest man, but he is a very good third option. I think if you want to do a back four, you pick your two best centre backs, and you basically go, you two are the two best centre backs, and you're going to be playing all season. So learn everything about each other.
Yeah.
Learn each other's weaknesses, learn each other's strengths, learn how to complement each other, and then from there you can make up for having a 28-year-old centre back because you've got two people that know each other really, really well.
Sure.
That's me from the spreadsheet playing Football Manager, doesn't spend too much time talking to millionaires football methodology. I could be completely wrong, but sometimes it is helpful just to have a 35-year-old to tell a young man, you stand there. But obviously, there is more than one way to play a game of football.
Sure.
I think no one's going to come in very soon. I think I've had quite a few Southampton fans talk about how the team looks more solid with three at the back. Hassel will play three at the back, not because he likes it, but because he's trying to make up for deficiencies in quality with quantity.
Sure.
Which it's pragmatism, right? When you want to play a good three at the back, the idea is one of the players can take the ball out of defence and move into midfield and start counter-attacks from deep. Or you have one player as a contingency, or the pragmatic version is you have one player who basically is the sweeper and just like cleaned up mistakes. For both versions, if you want a sweeper, you'd prefer to have either a really experienced person who's played sweeper before, or someone who's quite mobile and can run up and down and snuff out those things with tackles. I don't think Southampton quite have that. I think Yoshida's quite a good experienced sweeper, but again, Southampton can be quite vulnerable to balls over the top. I don't trust Yoshida in a foot race when he's running towards his own goal. And I think in terms of having a centre back that is comfortable taking the ball into midfield, I don't know if Southampton has that player in defence. I think Kevin Dancer's good with the ball at his feet. I think Benerick has been good in limited spells, but again, they've not quite got the personnel for three at the back. They've got good wing backs and full backs for playing five at the back or with that wing back system. But it's no easy fix. My thing right now is Southampton's problem is they create a lot of chances, but they don't score that often, and they're going to give up at least one goal every single game, to which you can do two methods. You can either sit deeper and then try and play five at the back, which might invite more pressure. So you go from conceding one every game to maybe conceding 1.5 or 2 every single game. Or you can basically flood the forward positions and go, screw it, let's try and win every game 3-2. I think Southampton fans, after the bad football of Pellegrino, the pragmatic football of Claude Puel, and I have no idea if you can call that football of Mark Hughes, would like it if Southampton played, hell for leather, let's try and score multiple goals a game.
Yeah. I'm torn because have always been a defense first kind of a person, but coming from a very much American sports background and being a catcher, very much in tune with, keep getting guys out, keeping guys off base, keeping yourself out of trouble in terms of baseball. And when I see teams line up with, I used to play with a 5-4-1 formation on FIFA and just try not to lose. And that gets boring as a player, never mind as a fan. So I'm much more, like I said before, I'm super excited to see us kind of go forward and press. And if we lose because somebody carves us open because we've opened ourselves up a little bit, so be it. But at the same time, you kind of got to stay in the league too. So you have to address it at some point. I mean, looking ahead a little bit for the team, running up until Christmas. I mean, even over the course of the next few matches before the next international break, things don't get easy. Manchester City twice, granted one of them's in a cup competition, but coming against a Wolves team and a Leicester City team. I mean, I'm not super optimistic about the next kind of run of fixtures, especially because you're going to see Everton at the end of that, and that's currently a team that's you're battling. They're keeping you out of the relegation zone essentially. What does Southampton look like maybe by the time Christmas rolls around? What do you envision us kind of where do you even see us being in the table, and if we're going to avoid kind of, I don't know, another relegation battle, do you think we have to go with the back four? And has there been any hint from Hassan Hoodle or anybody else around the club that you've heard? And don't I'm not asking you to give away sources or anything like that, but is there anything to suggest that we will make that move and kind of switch formations, or do you think we're going to see this constant kind of changing of personnel and formation in both in game and from game to game?
I think especially the Bournemouth defeat sort of was a turning point for Hassel, where he realised he'd been chopping and changing a little bit too much and he wants something more solid. So after the defeat against Bournemouth, you saw Hassel was a bit more reluctant to make substitute changes and make changes in shape against Tottenham Hotspur. He admitted he might have got that wrong. He said, I didn't want to make a change after Tottenham went down to 10 men because I wanted to wait and see something, which was an interesting response. And then he tried a 4-3-3 against Chelsea, to which he said he might have made a mistake trying to play a bit too ambitious with a 4-3-3 against Chelsea there. I think at the start of the season, we knew this would be a really, really bad fixture for Southampton. So Southampton will play the first 12 games of the season featured them playing against 10 of the teams. Like that, the first 12 games, sorry, let me say that again. Southampton's first 12 games of the season featured them playing against every single member of the top half last season. That's brutal.
Yeah.
And Hassel said he's not going to pay too much attention to the Premier League table until Southampton has played everyone at least once, which I don't like looking at the table until now, the second international break. And I said nothing really counts until the 10th game of the season. And I think Southampton are playing just a bit further along than that. We know for a fact now, no one really knows how to defend in the league right now. If you play fantasy football, it's a bit helter-skelter. There's no point buying defenders. So it's a league-wide problem with defense. VAR had a really interesting impact on Southampton and everyone in the Premier League. So I've written that piece about how Southampton have been quite fortunate with VAR decisions as well. So there's a lot to get round. I think what we're going to see between now and the end of November is Ralph will probably try and play a bit more pragmatic. He's going to probably make a lot less changes with his personnel. And I think a lot is going to be asked of Moussa Djeneba when he comes back to fitness. If you gave me a shiny penny to make a bet, I would imagine we're going to get a flat back four in the lesser big games. So I think against Wolves, we might see a back four. But against Manchester City, especially for that double header, I think we're going to see a back five because even if Southampton are favourites, it's never nice to get absolutely decimated in a game of football. So I think Hassel's approach to the Manchester City 2 games is basically, can he play those games, play good football, and not have an embarrassing scoreline, which could damage morale a bit more. So I think the 5 will be the most dominant formation we'll see until the end of November.
Okay. All right. We got a couple of questions, and you got a couple minutes. I don't want to keep it too long.
Yeah, keep going.
Let's go. All right. So, one of the things that patrons of the show get is the opportunity to have their questions kind of pushed to the front each and every week, and we try to get to all the questions. And this week, I think we can do that. But Giorgio Spicagno, one of the patrons of the show, says, "Hey, Tekken or Mortal Kombat, and also which GTA rules all?"
Tekken or Mortal Kombat? That's really interesting because I grew up in a Street Fighter house. Okay. So my novel is about Street Fighter. Is about Street Fighter 2. I grew up in the arcade scene of the early 90s. So I grew up in a big Street Fighter house. My younger brother does studied computer games for a living. So he did video game art and design for university, and he's got a very particular interest in fighting games. So he argues that every single good fighting game is like rock, paper, scissors. So we play primarily Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat in our households, although we do like a bit of Tekken. Okay. But yeah, that's if you want me to rank all 3: Street Fighter number 1, Mortal Kombat number 2, Tekken number 3, Dead or Alive number 4, and then we used to play a lot of the Marvel vs. Capcom games as well.
Ooh, okay.
As for the best Grand Theft Auto game, my brother always maintains Vice City is the greatest game ever. My favorite has been San Andreas. I got quite far in GTA 5, and then someone stole my Xbox in 2013.
Oh no!
So now I bought a PS4 copy of GTA 5, and I'll get round to completing that game one day. But I'm kind of busy doing a job now.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where I can't play as much games as I want to because I'm supposed to be running all the time. I'm currently playing The Last of Us. That's on PS Plus, so I'm playing that for the first time. That's a lot of fun.
For me, I think GTA 3 hit just at a very pivotal moment in my life. I think it was the PlayStation 3 what came out, or maybe it was PlayStation 2. I can't remember. I was 16.
PlayStation 2 was GTA 3.
Yeah. So
PlayStation 3, yeah.
I remember I got PlayStation 2, GTA 3, a surround sound system, all about the same time, and then also then discovered marijuana, and it was like from there it was I spent a lot of time just completely immersed in that. So I'm sorry to everybody who was my friend before then. I didn't even talk to you anymore. But it's been a long time since I've really immersed myself in a video game like that. But yeah, I remember that fondly, and I just actually had to get rid of it because my son was like, "What's this?" I was like, "Something we're not going to play, son. Like, we're just going to move that along." But Giorgio also asks, do you think the 4-2-2-2 should be scrapped? The team seems really unbalanced in the formation, and also it doesn't seem to work in the league when the league doesn't mind just pumping balls over the top and kind of making our passing channel kind of coverage kind of obsolete. So we talked about it a little bit, but I mean, do you think that it's time to move on, or do you think that that formation still has some life left in it with this team and in this league?
While I spend a lot of time looking at tactics and shape, I recommend no one should think of any tactic or shape being the be-all and end-all of everything. You think of them all like rock, paper, scissors. Every tactic has their pluses and minuses, and some tactics can be defeated by other ones more effectively than others. I think the 4-2-2-2 that Ralph Hasenhüttl played at Red Bull Leipzig, we are sitting as someone who's watching all the Southampton games. I really, really want to see Naby Keita play for Liverpool, because I'm beginning to wonder if the 4-2-2-2 works a lot, because Naby Keita was basically superhuman from that position, double pivot. I think that formation is what Ralph wants to play, and I think it's not a case of what I think about it. I think it's a case of this is what he's going to do. This is everything he's planning to do for this team. The team is striving to get to this goal, and I can complain and kick and scream, but it's going to happen. The problem with the 4-2-2-2 in this current state is Southampton yet to play their strongest backline. So I don't think it's a good idea to do that if one of your defenders is going to be Vestergaard, because Vestergaard is not the most comfortable defender with the ball at his feet, and he can sometimes be defeated in aerial duels, which is difficult. So I wouldn't recommend playing a back four with Vestergaard as on your centre back. And the other problem is, as I described, there's a little bit too much of a muchness in central midfield. So Hjorberg Romeo and Ward-Prowse all have very similar skills where when you're playing a double pivot in the 6 there, it's very important one of those pivots is someone who likes to get ahead of the ball and play 1-2s and then join the other men going forward, which Southampton haven't got yet. So another central midfield option would be really, really valuable there. Also, like I said before, the front 4, Che Adams, Danny Ings, Nathan Redmond, Moussa Djenepo, that's supposed to be the front 4 in the 4-2-2-2. We haven't seen that yet. The 4-2-2-2 will be very good once we get Gunn, Bertrand, Benerick, Ganzo, Valerie, Romeo, Højbjerg, Redmond, Djenepo, Adams and Ings. I think that as a first 11 is top half quality. And I think that with the 4-2-2-2 looks like a good side playing the 4-2-2-2. So I want to see that before I say this formation is done for.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I think that's fair enough. And you're right. We haven't seen that formation yet, or that formation with that group of players yet through injury or whatever it was. So we'll have to kind of wait and see. And hopefully that means the international break is coming at a decent time and we can get guys kind of back healthy, but we'll have to kind of wait and see as the news comes out. The Southampton page, which is the partner page of the show, asks, when will Ross Wilson's departure be confirmed? And I don't know if you have any information on that or if you can speak to that or if we have to wait. But I mean, have you heard anything about that? I mean, the stories of him leaving have been kind of circulating now. And I think some people are happy about it. Some people are worried about it. I'm kind of not sure how to feel about it. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
This will be my piece I'm going to start writing this on Monday. So I'll have a piece on this in the Athletic sometime before the end of next week. Okay. What I can say is there's enough smoke to this story for me to assume there's a fire. And I think Ross Wilson's departure is a case of when is it announced rather than if it's ever going to be announced. Okay. You are right. He has had a very interesting tenure at Southampton. He has brought in players such as Virgil van Dijk and I want to say Sadio Mane to Southampton, but he's also brought in players that he knows he should not have, or he has admitted he's made some mistakes. Mm-hmm. So in a very recent fan forum, Ross Wilson said someone asked him why Southampton don't spend more than 15 million on the player because of the TV money. They've got money, and they said, why don't they spend big money on players? To which Ross Wilson said, this is how, explained how transfers work at Southampton, and said, you also have to bear in mind the majority of our signings that we've made above 15 million haven't really worked well. Yeah. And he said there's one particular case where we over-supported the manager because the manager really wanted a player he had a previous history with, and we over-supported him to too much money, and now that's not done well. To which, the player in question was quite clearly Carrillo, and the manager is Pellegrini. So he's had some hits, he's had some misses. His hits probably just outweigh his misses. With the current revamping of the academy system and what he's done with Ralph Hassel over the summer has been really, really interesting. So the academy is now trying to move not just to get in talented players from age 6 up, but also to get players from outside of the traditional catchment area from the age 16 up. So Jan Valery is sort of the latest academy success of Ross Wilson's recent time. So sort of looking out to France rather than traditional catchment areas to get a player who was in their late teenage years to come to Southampton and then immediately join the first team. I think he's done good work. I think he will continue to do good work. And I think Wilson's departure probably says a lot more about what Southampton is going to look to do under the ownership of the Gow family than it does about Ross Wilson.
Okay. All right. Just one more. Justin Woodward says, what have you enjoyed most about reporting on Southampton and the Premier League? And Justin is another one of the patrons of the show, and I think it'd be a good one to end on. And yeah, so what's been the most enjoyable thing about whether it's moving to Southampton or something in Southampton or just covering the team? What have you enjoyed the most?
Watching football in the stadium all the time. It's one of those things that it shouldn't be so surprising, but it really does completely change your appreciation of football, and it reminds you football is not a film or a TV show, but it's first and foremost a day out. It's a sense of community and whatnot. So obviously I'm doing all the home and away games as well. So I'm also traveling up and down the country. So one thing I'm appreciating is basically traveling to places outside of London and going, oh my God, look at the north. this is amazing.
Yeah.
It's been quite good. My appreciation of VAR has changed quite a lot in the last couple of weeks. So I'm quite a futurist, and I believe VAR isn't the problem. I believe the broken rule book of football is the problem, not VAR. And my appreciation of VAR has changed because in the stadium it is absolutely baffling. But I'm rigged up to all sorts of computers and whatnot, and I can still only just about understand what's going on with VAR.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine. I now understand why so many people don't like VAR, because in a football stadium it makes no sense. Apart from offsides, I think VAR for offsides is a good thing, but the handball rule in combination with VAR is baffling, and there are 2 or 3 other things in VAR that are just what. So that's been good. My football education and my geography education and just my education in terms of how people live on a weekend has changed rapidly. Southampton on a weekend where they win at home is completely, well, I say when they win at home. I've not seen Southampton win at home yet, but that's quite sad. I'm assuming the city itself, when Southampton finally win at home, will be completely different on a Saturday night than when they lose, because the city does feel a bit sad when they do lose. And it's that sort of stuff I'm really getting appreciation for.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that all sounds good, man. And I just want to say thank you for doing this. Obviously it's taken up a good bit of your time, and I can't thank you enough. I owe you a drink, whether it's coffee or otherwise, next time I'm over, and hopefully that's not too long, but we'll see how it all goes.
Come round. I wear green on match days, so you should be able to find me at any point in time. Yeah. And I'll get you a beer for sure.
It's got to go the other way, I think, but I appreciate that. But yeah, man, thank you so much. And I hope maybe you'd be open to doing this again, but just thank you for doing this, and I hope the listeners have enjoyed it.
Great. It's been a pleasure. And if you want to do one, let me know.
That does it for this week's episode of the Southampton Delivery Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed it. Special thanks this week goes out to Carl Anka. You can find him on Twitter at Anchorman616. It's ANKAMAN 616. If you want more of Carl, sign up for The Athletic UK. There's a free trial link in the show notes. Make sure you head over there, see what it's all about. If you want to sign up, you can. If you don't, you don't have to. But that's where Carl does his writing. You can also catch him on the Totally Football Show from time to time. We mentioned that he did the Parts Unknown wrestling podcast. There's a link to that as well. Producer Ben Green, one of my all-time favorite people, one of the people that I have to thank for helping me get started. His books and his podcast, very much influential and instrumental in getting this thing going. So special thanks to everybody there. Carl was also on the Saints FC podcast this week, so look for that. That'll be out. If it's not out already, it should be out soon. You get more from him there. The show would not be possible without some help from our partners, including the Southampton page, where you should go for all your Southampton FC news and needs. You can follow along on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook to stay up to date with everything going on at the club. The logo for the show is designed by Matt Beeling. You can find him on Instagram at the We Are Southampton page. And all music for the show comes courtesy of the Free Music Archive at freemusicarchive.org. The intro song is Epic Song by Boxcat Games, and the end of show credits that you're listening to right now is Aim is True by Poddington Bear. If you're new to the show and haven't done so already, you can subscribe to the show to make sure you don't miss future episodes. There are plenty of links on the show website at southamptondelivery.com. If you've been around a while and you've been enjoying the show, please consider writing a review. It helps new people find the show. It helps it show up for people, and it's something that I truly appreciate. And another thing I truly appreciate is the patrons of the show. So shout out to all of you guys. Thanks for making the show great. Thanks for making it possible. I really do appreciate it. Once again, thank you to all the listeners out there. Thank you to Carl Anka. Once again, you can find him on Twitter at Anchorman616. And we will be back next week, hopefully talking with Freddie after a win away at Wolves. But we'll see how it all goes. But until then, thanks for listening. And remember that together, we march on.